So I'll now move on to hand over to Steve Rocha from Pratiek in India, and he will share his experience of working particularly with the UPR mechanisms. So over to you, Steve.
Just a moment, Steve. Steve, can you just stop your sharing at the for a moment? Thank you. Right, Steve, you're ready to go. You can start sharing also.
Thank you. So thank you, Brian, for that introduction and for this opportunity to share our experiences. But perhaps I must begin with a word of gratitude to Edmund Rice International. In 2011, I had the fortune of being one of the first few to come there for the first training on the UPR. I was also lucky that the next year itself, India was on for its UPR's review. And therefore, while the iron was hot from the learning of Geneva, I was able to use it with young people making their own submission to the UPR on the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And it was well received. 10% of all the recommendations made to India came from our interaction. And as I was as we were preparing this year's report, I noticed that even last year, lots of the countries did take up our recommendations. And much of the recommendations are either implemented in progress, there are one or two not implemented at all, but that's probably food for us for the next few years to push our governments to deliver. As Kevin did mention, Pratik is the word for everyone, and we're hoping that all rights, that the word U stands for universal, and the idea of all rights being realized in all countries by all governments is what we really were charged with when we came back from Geneva, and that's why we'd like to take this tool forward and use it with our young people across the country. Yeah, so we basically are an organization that gets young people to advocate for themselves for an inclusive, sustainable, participatory, and just Earth community. And what better mechanism could we have than UPR if we're an organization that our theory of sea change talks about child rights and earth rights, child advocacy, child participation, community engagement, collaborations, and of course, creative mediums and child-friendly resources. So the UPR became an ideal tool for us to use in this realization of these aspects of our theory of change. We have 444 million children in India, and we try to engage various communities of children from across the country. We are a 1.4 billion nation, and with 444 million children, we wanted to engage different segments of children from across the country in this wonderful process. Some of these young people were rescued from child trafficking, child labor, child marriages. Some couldn't read and write, they've never been to school. Some are living under flyovers and on the streets, and all of them engaged with this tool. I'm really underlining that because if we think that reports to the UN are meant to be written by the literate and the educated, it's time to think again, because the voices of these young people, and just their simple stories, I'll share one or two of them in the process, were really the base of our entire report. So we have the sustainable goals and child rights as our base for the report, as you'll see later on. But the last time we had recommended for on education, for example, we did entire reporting based on the Sustainable Development Goals, because we had engaged young people in actually framing the goals in the first place. 120,000 children from across the country were involved in feeding back to the UN on what they'd like to see the goals in Agenda 2030. And so we kept the framework around the SDGs. And we had made 3 recommendations on SDG 4, and Slovakia took up all 3 and the Indian government supported them. Some of these are more or less in progress, but the biggest one we want is the right to education being extended both sides, from class 3-year-old to 6-year-olds on one side, and the other side from class 14-year-olds to 18-year-olds as well. But it's become a good tool for us to really press for the right for education in India. But here's the impact of just this powerful tool. On the first submission in 2012, we asked Slovenia to press for the 6% of the GDP being dedicated to education. In 2020, the government of India finally accepted it as its mandate under the National Education Policy. That means 12 to the power of 12 trillion rupees will be dedicated annually to public education in India, to children who are mostly marginalized. And that's huge, which we as a small organization would never be able to think of. Even thinking beyond the 6 zeros at the end is quite difficult for us. But here we are able to use a tool like this to press for bigger policy decisions. And I think another one was we pressed for the ILO Convention on minimum age as well as worst forms of child labor to be signed by India and ratified. India has finally done that, and we now have a law that's more compliant towards this. There are changes we're still fighting for, and this particular UPR report will ask for those changes in the present law on child labor. But they're all based out of children's consultations. Now you might be wondering why they're not wearing masks, an old picture, because this time around, all our consultations were online because of COVID protocols. A challenge in itself because many of our children don't have devices, but we use our powerful network of NGOs across the country and schools to get children engaged in this process. Some NGOs had to be given tablets to engage with our processes as well. So we had a training of trainers, we had local consultations, about 100 of them of 40 children each, so 4,000 children engaged in this entire process. Remember, it's the north, south, east, west of India. Practically every state and union territory covered, except for Daman and Diu and Dadra Nagar Haveli, two small little union territories, but the rest of India and its children were represented. We collected the data, we collated the data. Then we got our Council of Child Ministers coming together and looking at the data and the recommendations, meeting up with experts on each theme, actually each global goal, plus 3 more. And they listened to them on what these children's issues are, their stories are, their recommendations are, and drafted the final report. But in the meantime, our staff interacted with adult conversations and consultations happening on the adult UPR report by the WGHR, the Working Group on Human Rights. That was a very effective tool for us because we got to know of the diverse complications and intricacies around human rights issues in India from different people from across the country. And that influenced also the children's final report because we took those issues back to the children in their consultation. We've nearly finished the final draft, the UPR, and we're trying to fine tune it with ex-Niners minors who are over 18 right now and college students who are helping us do the research around statistics and around present data available on each of the goals. We've got more work to do once we submit it. We've got ECOSOC status and we're doing it as a joint report with ERI and Pratik. This is our first attempt at this. So we'll need the wisdom and the guidance of ERI. But we'll be circulating among NGOs. We really want to use this as an exercise of bonding NGOs together. NGOs in India have gone through quite a bit of a punching with our present government who looks at NGOs as opposition rather than people who can complement the work of the government. So we said this is a good occasion to bring all child rights organizations together and all human rights organizations together to put forward one or a few appeals together. So we're going to meet with embassies and the UN officials next. We'll meet with children abroad as well, asking them to then take any of these issues with either our Indian commission, High Commission, or their own ministries to say, can you place this before the UN permanent mission, their own permanent mission, or at the UN itself. We will also be interacting with our own ministry, and there's a question mark about permanent mission because it involves finances and travel. But along with that now, what's emerging right now is the mandate of our children's parliaments. Each of the global goal ministers will now have one campaign call throughout. So one is campaigning for the right to midday meals throughout the year to be extended to holidays and to include breakfasts and nutritious meals, and also to the whole range of schooling. Uh, the other is campaigning for the child labor law to be changed to exclude children, permission for children to work in household industries and other such changes. But now they've got their campaign calls for the entire year. Because once we believe that these goals are either adopted or rejected or whatever they are by our government, we've got to do lots of work behind the scenes. The midterm review proved to be a wonderful exercise that the WGHR organized for us. And we really got a good update from experts on what the current status of our UPR recommendations was. It also gave us a good insight into environmental laws and rights, which was not formally, I've not seen many UPR reports focus on environmental laws in India, but this time we did a very focused consultation on that, and that's reflected in our UPR report too. So that's what we're using. And yeah, we did a focus on children reviewing child rights also as part of the process. So we had a two-pronged attack. One was using the report to the Committee on the Rights of the Child. India was due for its report last year, but let's recall that even the previous time, India joined two reviews together and submitted one report. And I think it plans to do it again this year on the riding under the pretext or the back of the COVID pandemic. But we said, if India is not doing the report, nothing's stopping us from writing a review from a children's perspective and children doing a stock taking themselves. They did from the angles of the principles of child rights, parents and child rights, government and child rights, vulnerable children, protection, life, participation. And we've now introduced something called ecological rights of children. We got a framework that the Child Rights Connect of the EU in Geneva had put together on one of the general days of discussion. And we are using that as a framework for what we are calling ecological rights of children. So out of this entire process, we've got a report on the UPR, B, CRC in India report, which actually is not the Convention on the Rights of the Child review, but we're calling it Children Reviewing Rights in India report. And that's what we're going to take to our Minister of Women and Child Development, who we've already met around this report, the shadow report. She was graceful to meet all our students for an hour, and surprisingly was actually patient and listening, very unlike her normal self. But we were happy that we were able to use these platforms of meeting with MPs, meeting with the Parliamentary Forum on Children, armed with these consultation reports, because it really involved children from the most vulnerable backgrounds. Going forward, we're going to involve our students from regular schools as well in the process. Remember, we have this entire thing called children's parliaments, where we're trying to federate children's voices at local levels, neighborhood levels, and in fact with parliamentarians at the national level. This is a picture of a couple of years ago. This year we had their swearing in online, but these kind of processes happened online. I didn't want to show you boring pictures of little screenshots, but this brought back the old memories of children's parliaments. But we are able now every year to organize a parliament of children in parliament. We do it twice in the year. One is a formal one where the Vice President of India presides, and therefore our questions and our submissions are very tailored and really regulated. But we also have an informal one where the lady in the middle is the convener of the Children's Parliamentary Forum for Children. And we have an informal one where all parties come together and take up these issues of children. So that's been our approach. And we base it on the UPR as well as the Convention on the Rights, the report, the review on the Committee on the Rights of the Child. We've broken up the entire thing into development for all, including budgets, inclusion of all, so SDGs that reflect inclusion and child participation. In fact, we have an 18th goal, which we call all rights for all children. And finally, Earth for all, which we also include ecological rights for children. So this is how our entire thing is going to be broken up. But our appendix is working out to be much bigger than the report itself because we have 5,000 words limitation. But we really are using this as a tool for children to understand the UPR, to understand child rights, to understand the SDGs, to understand the constitutional rights in the Indian context, to understand the BJP, our ruling party's manifesto, and what they can keep governments accountable to talk about this year's focus is going to be on the national policy for children. So having studied and done a stock taking on the CRC and the UPR, they're now armed to do a national policy review and ask for changes. I can already sense that the big change they're going to ask for is including environmental rights of children in the national policy for children, as well as the Convention on the Rights of the Child itself. It is quite silent on environmental rights. But to give you a sense of how these consultations are building up energy and steam for us to really do advocacy on the ground. And when I say on the ground, I don't just mean Delhi. I'm also talking about Gram Panchayats, which is village councils in India and municipal councils, where children are going there and saying, can we have consultations with you on aspects of child rights in India? So the positives have been that it's given us a tool to bring NGOs together, to bring children together and recognize children's participation on a major international tool. The positive has also been that India at the moment, I'm sure all the Indians present here would agree, is really going through a bit of a silent kind of emergency where our voices are not really appreciated or honored. And we've seen that for ourselves where official interactions and authentic interactions with governments are really limited. So it's been a good tool for us to take voices and our issues to the back door into the international committee, rather than going straight to the press or going through our democratically set up institutions in India. Limitations have been that with this tight control of our government, if we say things that the government doesn't like at these international platforms, we could be asking for a bit of trouble. So another way to do that is to ask different NGOs abroad to take up the contentious issues we can't speak about here in India. One of them being the AFSPA, the Armed Forces Special Protection Act in India, and other such contentious ones. We have not mentioned about FCRA ourselves. So the advice I would give would be just do it. I just came back and said, let's write a report and we'll see how it grows. And took the help of different NGOs here. ERI was there, big support to us. And so far now, we've been able to submit, this is going to be our third submission. And also we're now involved in the midterm reviews. So the just do it is basically my advice. It's simple. If children from different vulnerable backgrounds can do it in India, it's doable. And the simple format we follow is tell us a story, give us a statistic to back that story, give us a thank you note to the government. And one of the thank you notes we've done this year is to look back at the last UPR review and thank the government of India for either recognizing, for accepting, for noting the recommendations, and the governments for making the recommendations, and then using the WGHR's review to say whether it's partially implemented, fully implemented, or not implemented at all. So it becomes like a thank you, but it also to both our government of India as well as the countries who made the recommendations, but a backhanded way of saying, India, you still have to work on this, and governments of the world, please pressurize. We also did a voluntary national review on the SDGs and a CRC review, as I mentioned earlier. Lastly, about the special rapporteurs, since 2000, India's had only 10 visits from rapporteurs, because even though India has this blanket invitation to all rapporteurs, when they actually ask for invitations, India finds a reason why they're not to be invited. For example, right now, 14 reminders have been given to India for invitations. And I think there are five requests are still pending. So we've not had really any experience on using special rapporteurs here in India, but are very happy with the kind of impact we've been able to gain by using the UPR and the CRC review. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That's very informative and very inspiring to hear of all the work that you're doing in India. So again, I invite everybody to add any questions that you might have for Steve in the chat box. The link is at the bottom of the screen there, and then we'll give Steve an opportunity to respond in a few minutes. Just to add a couple of brief comments about ERI's engagement with the UPR. We've often submitted standalone statements, but more frequently, we've joined with partners in making a joint submission. Sometimes we've been the lead organisation in that submission. Sometimes we've been a partner, as with the current submission that's being drafted by Pratiek that Steve mentioned, and the recent Geneva International Catholic Centre submission on Papua New Guinea. And sometimes that just means adding our name in support of the submission. At other times, we might contribute a section on a particular topic. Both of those ways have been effective for us in encouraging our members on the ground to become involved in the process. Sometimes our local people can feel a bit overawed and daunted by the prospect of having to draft and make a submission. So by encouraging them to take part in a small way initially, it can build confidence for future engagement. And I think I can say we've seen that happen. And just to mention one other comment that about an issue that Steve raised, and that was the possible repercussions for NGOs for speaking up. At this current Human Rights Council session, I'll be delivering a statement about Myanmar. Human Rights International and our network is not present in Myanmar at all, but a number of our partner organisations are. They're afraid to speak up and be identified, but they have forwarded the information to us, and I will deliver the statement without identifying them. So, I mean, that's one way of bringing the issue forward, but it is a very real concern that of the possible impact on people on the ground when statements are made at the UN, and that's something that needs to be kept in mind, unfortunately.